I wish you weren't my boss." The words escaped my mouth so quietly that I thought they would disappear into the empty office. I didn't know that the one person I was talking about hadn't left. She was standing directly behind me, close enough to hear every word. When I finally turned around, her expression wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. There was something wounded in her eyes, something that told me those 6 words had reached a place inside her that I had never meant to touch. "My name is Daniel, and for 3 years I had worked under Victoria Hale, the youngest executive director in our company. Everyone knew her as brilliant, disciplined, and almost impossible to impress. She could walk into a meeting where 10 people were arguing and silence the room with one look. To me, she had always been more than just intimidating. She represented everything I had failed to become. While she climbed higher, I seemed to remain stuck, working late, paying bills, and quietly trying to keep my life from falling apart. If stories about second chances mean something to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes the person standing between us and happiness isn't an enemy at all. Sometimes, they are simply someone we never took the time to understand. That evening had been brutal. I had spent the entire day fixing a project that had gone wrong because of a decision I had made weeks earlier. My younger sister had called that morning to tell me that she needed help with her rent, my bank account was nearly empty, and my apartment lease was due for renewal. I felt like every part of my life was demanding something I didn't have. Then Victoria called me into her office and calmly told me that the company had decided to remove me from the project. She said it wasn't a punishment, but all I heard was failure. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out carrying the kind of shame that makes a person feel invisible. I stayed late that night because I didn't want to go home and face my thoughts. Around 9, most of the lights on our floor were off. Rain tapped against the windows, turning the city outside into a blur of silver and black. I thought Victoria had already gone home, so when I saw her office door open, I stepped inside to leave some documents on her desk. I noticed a framed photograph lying face down beside her computer. Without thinking, I picked it up. It showed Victoria standing beside an older woman who looked remarkably like her. On the back was a handwritten message: "You were always stronger than you believed." I put the photograph down and suddenly wondered who Victoria really was when nobody was watching. I had never seen her family, never heard her talk about her private life, and never imagined she could have fears of her own. Then I noticed an envelope on her desk. It was addressed to a hospital. I immediately felt guilty for looking, so I turned away and headed toward the door. But frustration had already built too high inside me. "I wish you weren't my boss," I whispered. Silence. My heart stopped. I slowly turned around. Victoria was standing in the doorway. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Her coat was still damp from the rain, and a few strands of hair had fallen across her face. She looked exhausted rather than furious. I wanted the floor to open beneath me. I started apologizing, but she raised one hand. "Don't," she said softly. I expected anger. Instead, she walked to the desk, picked up the photograph, and stared at it. "I wish I wasn't your boss sometimes too," she said. That sentence stunned me. She explained that the woman in the photograph was her mother, who had been fighting a serious illness for months. Victoria had been working 18-hour days because she was trying to keep the company alive while also paying for her mother's treatment. She had stopped taking vacations, stopped seeing friends, and barely slept. Everyone thought she was cold because she had learned that showing weakness at work could cost people confidence in her. Then she looked at me and said something I would never forget. She told me that she had removed me from the project not because she thought I was incompetent, but because she had noticed I was struggling. She had seen the late nights, the unanswered calls, and the way I kept staring at my phone whenever I thought nobody was watching. She knew I was overwhelmed. "I thought giving you less responsibility would help you breathe," she said. I couldn't answer. All the anger I had carried suddenly felt embarrassingly small. I told her about my sister, my finances, and how terrified I was that one more failure would destroy everything I had worked for. Victoria listened without interrupting. Then she told me something about herself that changed the way I saw her forever. Her father had died when she was young, and after that, her mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Victoria had promised herself that she would become successful enough that her mother would never struggle again. But success, she admitted, had become a prison. I kept thinking that if I worked harder, I could protect everyone, she said. Eventually I forgot that people don't need us to be perfect. They need us to be present. The rain continued outside. 2 people who had spent years misunderstanding each other were suddenly sitting across the same desk, realizing they had been carrying similar fears in completely different ways. The next morning, Victoria called me into her office. I expected another difficult conversation. Instead, she offered me a new position on a smaller team where I could rebuild my confidence. She also told me that the company had an employee assistance fund that could help my sister temporarily. I refused at first because pride is sometimes the last thing we know how to surrender. But Victoria simply told me that accepting help wasn't weakness. Months passed. I became better at my job, but more importantly, I became better at being honest. Victoria also changed. She began leaving the office before midnight. She took weekends off. She visited her mother more often. Slowly, the woman everyone feared became someone people trusted. One afternoon, I found Victoria sitting alone in the cafeteria, staring at her phone. Her mother had just finished another difficult treatment. Victoria looked frightened. This time, I didn't walk past her pretending not to notice. I sat beside her. "You don't have to be strong every minute," I told her. She looked at me and smiled. "I know," she said. "I'm finally learning that." A year later, Victoria's mother recovered enough to return home. My sister found a stable job and moved into her own apartment. I was promoted, but the promotion mattered less to me than the friendship that had grown between Victoria and me. We never forgot that rainy night. Sometimes we even laughed about it. But I never again wished she wasn't my boss. Because I finally understood that the person I had once seen as the obstacle in my life had actually been one of the people quietly helping me find my way through it. Life has a strange way of placing people in our path before we understand why they are there. Sometimes we judge someone by their title, their expression, or the distance they keep, never realizing they may be fighting battles just as painful as ours. And sometimes one careless sentence can become the beginning of a conversation that changes 2 lives. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes they have no one in their corner, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps stories about hope, compassion, and second chances reach people who may need them most. Before we end, I want you to leave one special comment: everyone deserves a second chance. Because you never really know what someone is carrying behind the face they show the world. And sometimes, the person standing right behind you when you think nobody is listening is the very person who might help you become who you were meant to be.